Republicans have regained the majority for the new session of Congress starting in early January. We spoke with Congressman Pat Fallon of the 4th District here in Texas about his priorities now that his party will be running the House.
Oh, Jack, obviously very pleased that we'll be in the majority. It was an interesting 2 years being in the minority. And the things that, that I saw really from a 35,000-foot view overview was the fact that Nancy Pelosi really didn't, well, in fact, all the Democrats, I don't know what was going on over the Senate, but in the House and the White House, they didn't want to talk, negotiate, chat, anything. I understand that they had the majority, but there was absolutely no input sought whatsoever. And I don't think that's good government. I hope the Republicans, it's divided government now, so everybody's going to have a seat at the table. But even if we ever control the three levers of government again, I don't think that's the proper way to do, govern for the American people.
So what are your priorities in this new term in the majority?
My personal ones do overlap with what the leadership has been talking about. I think we need to secure the border. Again, that's going to be difficult. All of our goals are going to be difficult, quite frankly, Jack, because we have divided government. But at least, again, now we have a seat at the table. First thing I'd like to see is securing the border. The wait in Mexico protocols, the migrant protection protocols worked. That is, when if you claim asylum, you wait in Mexico while your case is adjudicated. Inflation is a huge issue for everyone. I mean, if you just look at Thanksgiving, the cost of a turkey is up 21%, stuffing is up 69%, rolls 20%. So inflation is a tax on all Americans for everything we buy. Number one, no more gigantic spending bills outside the regular budgetary process. And then also, I think personally, we need to cut spending dramatically. A balanced budget amendment would be nice, but that might be chasing windmills. But I think we need to start that conversation again. We need to have restrictions put in place, like in Texas, we had in the legislature, we had sunset, would mean if a government program was implemented, it didn't just go on in perpetuity. There was a set period of time, and then it would be looked at to see if it was effective or not. I think those are important things to institute moving forward, because Americans inflation at 8% is something that's just really hurting the folks that are working for a living.
Well, on inflation, what is the remedy?
Well, as I said, the first and foremost, stop spending trillions of dollars that we do not need. And that stops because all spending bills originate in the House, and there won't be any more of those, and we won't be approving those moving forward. And again, putting remedies on government spending, because that's the #1 driver of inflation.
And then I wanted to ask you just your comments on the border. Do you think that because there is divided government now, that there will be some opportunity, and not only opportunity, but something gets done as far as, securing the border and immigration reform?
You would hope so. You look back in history after Bill Clinton, got his clock cleaned in the Democrats in 1994. Newt Gingrich, the speaker at the time, and President Clinton were able to work together and did some monumental things. So it's going to really depend on Joe Biden. It didn't give me a lot of hope when he said that he's not going to change a thing, because what he's been doing for the last 2 years didn't work. And he historically, for the last 4 or 5 presidents, had historically low approval ratings. There wasn't a gigantic red wave for a myriad of factors, I think one of which was the Roe v. Wade decision. But it wasn't it wasn't a stamp of approval by the American people on what's been happening over the last 2 years. It was more complicated and nuanced.
Isn't the problem, though, that President Biden didn't get his clock cleaned in the Senate?
Yeah, no, I think that maybe emboldened him, quite frankly. And the Senate is still remarkably close, and it was a bad map. That's a lot of things. A lot of people aren't talking about the fact that it was a very favorable map for the Democrats, because the Republicans were defending in a lot of tough seats, and they successfully defended all of those seats, save Pennsylvania, and that was with a retiring member. I think if Senator Toomey was running again, he would have been reelected. So it was it's kind of, maybe it was like a political draw in that sense, but we did take over the House. And one other thing to note that no one's talking about is the Republicans in the congressional candidates across the country, Republican candidates got 3.5 million more votes than Democrats. So people definitely wanted some change.
But there were a lot of predictions of a red tsunami, a red wave that didn't materialize either.
Yeah, you know what? And I'm guilty as charged there. I definitely thought and saw that happening. So there's a couple of things that we can break down really quickly. There was a red wave. It was limited to certain areas. Florida, for instance, there were 6 contested congressional races. The Republicans won them all. And then you saw Governor DeSantis win by 20 percentage points. New York State, New York, very blue state, they're going to have 11 members of Congress from the Republican Party from New York. That is remarkable. Nobody saw that coming as well. So you saw it was more a bit again of a red trickle than a red wave. But in Texas, you know, things, Mayra Flores lost, but she was in a district that Joe Biden would have carried by 18 percentage points, and she lost by 8. So Vicente Gonzalez is very lucky that that was drawn the way it was, because if even if it was a Democrat plus 10 district, Mayra would have beaten him.
Let me ask you about sticking on the border for a second.
Sure.
Do you anticipate the House reimbursing the state of Texas? As you know, the state has spent $4 billion trying to secure the border. Do you anticipate that happening?
Well, I filed legislation to do just that, and I hope the Lone Star Act. I hope that the Republicans in Congress will pass that bill. Now, what its fate will be in the Senate, it's maybe a snowball, and maybe that snowball's in Hades. But we'd like to see it get out of the House and see what happens thereafter, because it's not going to pass into law if it doesn't come out of the House first.
And I did want to ask you about this term. Before this term is up, the Respect for Marriage Act is going to come back to the House. Where are you on this issue? As you know, Democrats and supporters of this say this is necessary because when the Supreme Court issued its Dobbs ruling overturning Roe v. Wade, Justice Clarence Thomas said that they should look at other laws that were basically approved by the Supreme Court, same-sex marriage being one of them, rights, I should say. And so I'm wondering where you are on this issue.
Well, 3 things. First, that bill, when it was in the House, it did not go through the normal process. There were no hearings on that bill. There were no markups on that bill, and there was no debate on that bill. And that's very unfortunate. And as far as Clarence Thomas said, he didn't say anything about marriage or gay marriage at all. And I don't think that that's something that's going to be addressed by the Supreme Court moving forward. None of the 9 justices have said they're interested at all in that. And you're going to need 5 to take it up. But having said all that, I truly believe marriage, an issue like that, there's the 10th Amendment, which means that if it's not explicitly mentioned in the Constitution, it is up to the states. There are 50 laboratories of democracy, and that is the best way to do it. And so I voted no, and I'm going to vote no again, because it's the state of Texas that should decide, and the other states, what the definition of marriage is.
As you know, in the last week, former President Donald Trump threw his hat in the ring. And so there are some people who've already come out, some members of Congress from Texas have already come out and endorsed him. Others are waiting and seeing. Which camp are you in? Yeah,
well, I would, surprised that the president came out so quickly and did that. Listen, let's be very, very honest here. There's 2 superstar potential candidates. Well, President Trump has announced he's running. And then, of course, you have Governor Ron DeSantis from Florida. And those are the folks. I like contested primaries, quite frankly, Jack, because that's like a sword going through fire. The sword comes out stronger, at the end of the process. And much like if you had a captain that was always, sailing in smooth seas, they're not that great of a captain. So I think it'd be fascinating if Governor DeSantis does jump in. If not, clearly President Trump's cleared the field. I don't see anybody else having any kind of serious shot at our nominee. And then, what I'm really concerned about, and I think a lot of people are, is we need to make sure we have the strongest nominee possible that can win come November of 2024.
I know there's a lot of discussion on the Democratic side about whether President Biden should run again. What do you think?
Oh, I definitely think President Biden should run again.
Why is
Yeah.
that?
Because I think he's going to get beaten. All the things just in the last 2 years, I debated my Democratic opponent in a very safe Republican seat. We had a old fashioned style debate. And I did that because I really was curious as to how the Democrats could defend a lot of what I've seen over the last 2 years. And there wasn't. It was just attack, attack, attack. There wasn't a lot of defense. I mean, the border would be one issue, inflation and all this spending would be another. The debt, listen, and there's some Republicans who don't have good records on the debt, but Joe Biden has taken it to another level. And these kind of commonsensical things and fixes, the hypocrisy on COVID, when you said, there were all these restrictions domestically, or they're throwing people out of the military and government if they wouldn't take a shot. And yet you were allowing millions of people into the country that you didn't know who they were, that weren't tested for COVID. And then you were spreading them all over the country. That was incredible hypocrisy. So it'd be fascinating for me to see how Joe Biden can defend this, because any other Democrat is just going to say, hey, that was on his watch, not mine.
Congressman Pat Fallon of the 4th Congressional District in Texas, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. We wish you a very happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks, Jack. Appreciate it.